She heard the sound of the doors opening and immediately turned around, smiling brightly as she called out, "Belle." Seeing her radiant smile, he was filled with nostalgia, realizing how long it had been since he last saw his little sister. She was exactly as he remembered. Sarah jumped up from her chair, running joyfully towards him, and eagerly asked, "How did the ceremony go? What kind of weapon did you get?" Instead of answering, Belle simply hugged her tightly, his thoughts consumed with relief that she was safe. Sarah hugged him back, smiling, but then noticed something was off. "Is something wrong?" she asked gently. Belle remained silent, lost in his thoughts, apologizing to her silently. He couldn't protect her in his previous life. The memory of her lying on the floor, covered in blood, haunted him. He vowed that this time, he would prevent any tragedy. She would never experience pain or sadness again. He would not let anyone harm her. As he continued to hold her, Sarah suddenly winced and said, "You're hurting me." Belle, filled with worry, immediately let go and apologized. Sarah took a step back and laughed, assuring him, "Everything's fine. Your hugs just make me so happy." Then she noticed his tears. "Are you crying?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. She gently patted his head and said, "No matter what happens, everything will be okay because you have me." Belle was taken aback by her comforting words. Just then, the door burst open, and Zane entered. "Looks like the mongrels are getting along well," he sneered. He grinned at Belle and said, "I found out what happened." Sarah quickly hid behind her brother as Belle became wary. "Zane," he said, the name filled with caution. Zane grinned wider, his eyes gleaming with malice. "I heard everything," he said, stepping closer. "Something interesting happened at the ceremony, right?" Belle realized the priest must have told Zane everything. Lowering his head, Belle muttered, "I got the scabbard." Zane's face twisted with amusement before he burst into laughter, clutching his stomach. "A scabbard? That's not even a weapon. But for a half-breed mongrel like you, it makes sense." He sneered, "How are you going to fight with a scabbard? You two are just a couple of idiots." Belle clenched his fists, determined not to let Zane's words get to him. He would protect his sister, no matter what. "Take it back," Belle said. "Huh, did you say something?" Zane asked. "Take it back," I said. Zane clenched his hand into a fist and swung, aiming to teach Belle a lesson about respecting his elders. But this time, Belle didn't abide. He clenched his fist tighter and struck Zane hard under the chest. Zane gasped in pain, drool spraying from his mouth as he collapsed to his knees, unable to utter a word. Belle tilted his head, his voice cold. "I warned you. Never dare to insult Sarah again." Zane looked up, rage contorting his face. "You idiot," he shouted. Blue sparks ignited in his palm. "You shouldn't play with me." A spear materialized in his hands, and he took a fighting stance. "You're a useless idiot," he sneered. "I'll make you weep and beg for forgiveness. If you don't comply, I'll roast you like a pig on a spit." Belle glanced at the weapon, unimpressed. "A fire spear? Seriously?" he thought. "So be it," he said, extending his hand toward his sister. "Sarah, step back." Sarah called out to him worriedly, but Belle patted her on the head and smiled reassuringly. "Everything will be okay. Leave it to me." He extended one hand to the side, blue sparks crackling from his fingers, and summoned Evelyn, a snow-white sheath. Zane let out a chuckle. "Do you really think you can defeat me with a sheath? You're an E-rank paladin. You don't stand a chance." Flames erupted around Zane's spear as he pointed its tip at Belle. Belle remained silent, thinking about the paladin ranks. A newly minted paladin starts at F rank, and as they pour mana into their divine weapon, they advance to D rank, gaining the ability to use special attacks. To rise further, a paladin must awaken the unique abilities of their divine weapon. Zane was proud of achieving E rank at 14, but he still had much to learn. Belle grinned, which only made Zane angrier. "What are you laughing at?" Zane shouted. Belle's grin widened. "You're being cute." Furious, Zane swung his spear, flames blazing around him. "You're just a mudblood. I'll show you where you belong." Sarah's fear for her brother grew, and she called out to him, but Belle raised his other hand to the scabbard and commanded, "Sword of Light, appear." With a swift and light movement, he drew Caliban from its sheath. In an instant, he severed the tip of Zane's spear. Zane's eyes widened in shock, his face darkening as he stared at Caliban. "What kind of sword is this?" he muttered, unable to believe what had just happened. The severed tip of Zane's spear flew up and then crashed to the floor, piercing the ground between his legs. Zane hiccuped in fear, cold sweat dripping down his face. This is impossible," he whispered, his voice trembling. Belle approached Zane, his voice dripping with mockery. "What now? Are you going to make me cry and beg for forgiveness?" Zane, trembling with rage and shock, looked up at him. "You tricked me. If I had known you had a weapon, He staggered to his feet, using the wall for support. You won't get away with this so easily, he spat, before quickly heading towards the exit. Bell raised his hand, his voice cold. Where are you going? We're not done yet. In an instant, a flaming Ragnarok pistol appeared in Bell's hand. He took aim and fired at Zane, who was trying to escape down the corridor. The loud crack of the gunshot echoed through the room. The bullet whizzed past Zane's face, embedding itself in the wall and leaving a gaping hole. Zane froze in his tracks, eyes wide with terror. He turned to look at the hole in the wall, then back at Bell, who was now lowering his gun and taking a step closer. Never contact Sarah or me again, Bell said, his voice steady and dangerous. He raised the gun once more, aiming it at Zane. Remember that. Zane, visibly shaken, stammered, if you touch her again, I'll put a bullet in your forehead. Zane screamed in fear and bolted, disappearing down the corridor. Bell sighed, holstered his weapon, and turned back to Sarah, who stood behind him, her mouth agape in surprise. Are you okay? Bell asked gently as he walked up to her. Sarah nodded, though her eyes were wide. I was so afraid he would hurt you again. Was that your divine weapon? Bell nodded. I didn't say you'd figure it out. Sarah smiled, admiration in her eyes. You're incredible. Bell returned her smile but then frowned, thinking to himself that he would never let anyone take that smile away from her. Meanwhile, Zane hurried to report everything to his father, the Duke. Is this true? The Duke gasped as Zane, still trembling, confirmed his words. My lord, Zane began, bowing his head, Bell has multiple divine weapons. The Duke, Gallian Caddis, stroked his beard thoughtfully. Interesting, he murmured. He rose from his chair and began to walk past his son. Surprised, Zane immediately turned. Where are you going? I'm going to visit Bell, Gallian replied, a slight smile playing on his lips. I need to see this for myself. Bell, having returned to his room, collapsed onto his bed with a sigh. He hugged his pillow, his mind racing. He had managed to defeat Zane, but he was still trapped in the body of a child. He looked at his small palm and thought about how much strength he had lost. Controlling his mana was difficult, and though he had intended to shoot a fire bullet, it had only come out as a regular one. At this moment, he was only as strong as an F rank. He closed his eyes, frustration washing over him. This can't go on any longer, he whispered to himself. The Roth-Windsor family attacked them. Roth-Windsor, another renowned family, had a long-standing feud with the Catastrophe family. The reasons for their assault could be varied. Bell looked at his hand, extended towards the ceiling, and recalled the dark silhouette that killed him and Sarah. He was certain it belonged to the Roth-Windsor family. This time, he vowed to protect his sister. Clenching his hand into a fist, Bell resolved to elevate his status within this house. Just as this thought crossed his mind, the door to his room opened with a creak. He turned his gaze towards the entrance, and the Duke walked in, saying it had been a long time since they'd seen each other. Bell jumped out of bed, his mind racing. Dad? But why? Gallian Catastrophe fought a great battle 20 years ago, single-handedly taking on the evil god and the infamous monster Tartaros. He traversed the Dark Continent, home to monsters, and was nicknamed the Holy Sword of Genesis. Zane followed the Duke into the room. Bell looked at Zane and understood immediately. Zane knew something. They stood at the door while the Duke approached Bell. Bell thought this was even better. The best way to improve his status was to get his father's attention. He knelt before the Duke and greeted him, saying it had been a long time. The Duke looked down at him and remarked that Bell had indeed changed. Today, he had come as his father and invited Bell to talk. Bell looked up, fearing that one wrong word could cause the conversation to spiral out of control. The Duke sighed thoughtfully, extended his hand towards Bell, and told him to rise. Bell obeyed, feeling the Duke's terrifying aura. The Duke turned to his two sons and asked if they had fought. He reminded them that fighting was forbidden in his house and questioned why Bell had hurt his brother, whom he should respect. The Duke's attention then turned to Bell, who grew very anxious and remained silent. Zane, standing behind his father, chuckled quietly, thinking this was the end for Bell. No one in the house could oppose their father. Bell noticed Zane's mocking look and frowned. Then he turned his gaze to his father and said he was angry because Zane had insulted his little sister. The Duke's face darkened slightly, and he said he understood, but Bell had broken the rules over a minor offense. Bell confirmed this and boldly added that he did not regret it. The Duke gripped the scabbard on his belt tighter and asked if Bell regretted breaking his rules. Bell confidently replied that abandoning those he loves is a real shame for a paladin. He would protect his sister, even if the enemy was his older brother. Listening to Bell, the Duke suddenly frowned. Bell then declared that this was his chosen path as a knight. In response, the Duke swiftly grabbed the hilt of his sword, drew it from its sheath, and pointed the tip at Bell's throat. Even if your opponent is me, the Duke asked. Belle answered confidently, yes, even if you were my opponent. Despite hearing these words, the Duke's expression did not change. Suddenly, he smiled slightly and said he liked it. He waved his hand and declared that he would act as if nothing had happened. Zane was clearly shocked. Why? He exclaimed. The Duke turned to Zane, displeased. You not only lost to your brother in a duel but also bullied your sister. These words caused Zane to tremble slightly in fear. The Duke said Zane was a disgrace and ordered him not to show himself again. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe for the next part. Thanks for watching.